Yeah, hi there. I'm going to explain one PRD I have done recently, which is regarding the Microsoft Graph API integration for the purpose of login in the user microservice. So we have a user-based user microservice which is built on Spring Boot and Java. So on this, we need to create a new login endpoint which will implement the Microsoft Graph API integration, so that so that we achieve the login. So for this, what I have done is I have divided the PRD into a proper structure where I have given the overview of it first. So once you have the overview, and then in the overview, so I would mention like what is the basic purpose of this. Like when you create a new slash login REST API endpoint which will enable the OAuth 2.0 based authentication with Microsoft Graph API. So you describe this, and you also describe what is the use case for it. So it is intended to allow the users to log in. So that also we mention along with the Azure AD and Microsoft 365 credentials. So this is our overview, and we highlight the objectives in this overview section. So your objective will be to secure the user authentication, to integrate with Graph API, to provide a new REST API like called slash login within the application, and then our objective is also to create a clear API documentation and have it as a highly available and securely managed application. So these are the objectives. Then you highlight the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders within this? So first is the product team. Obviously they are the ones who will define the login experience and integration requirement. Then you will also have an engineering team, front end team, security team, and QA team. So all these stakeholders you have to mention. Then you mention the scope. So within the scope, you will mention what is within the scope, login is within the scope, integration of the third-party API is within the scope, JWT validation is within the scope, and API documentation and unit tests are also within the scope. This you will mention. Then you will clearly mention what is out of the scope. So for us, MFA was out of the scope, and front-end UI was also out of the scope at that stage because we just want to handle it in the backend. So these we clearly mention the out of the scope. Now we clearly mention the functional requirements. So what is the API endpoint? The endpoint is slash login. Then what is the method? It is the get method. Then the query params. So for example, the redirect URI is one query param, OAuth token is one request param. So these we mention, and then the response also. So if it's a redirect, it is a 302 redirect, or if it's a callback API, then we will have a code and state as query params, and we will have a 200 successful response, and if it's unauthorized we have a 401 response, and if it is invalid we have a 400 response. So that also you will mention clearly in the API endpoint. Then you will describe all these parameters in detail, you will describe the URL in detail, and then you will have a data model. So sample input like the token, the user ID, all this will be the sample input, and in the sample JWT claim you will have the sample response as well. So finally, and the authentication is successful, what are the tokens you will get? So that also you will outline in the document, and you will also mention about error handling, like all the 200 case, 302, 400, 401, all these cases you will mention, and any non-functional requirements if they are, so that also you will mention, like the performance. So the latency is maybe like 500 milliseconds, or the latency or the uptime, maybe it's 99% uptime or 199.9% uptime. So all these details you will give. We will also mention the health check endpoint within the document, and all the security steps you followed, like whether you followed HTTPS or whether you followed JDP and JWT encryptions. All this also we mentioned, or any rate limiting is there, that also you mentioned, like 50 requests per minute, and any errors are logged, those also you will mention. So finally, the integration requirements, and then the Azure AD requirements, and any internal dependencies like Redis dependency or Spring Security dependency, that also will mention. In the technical requirements, I will mention the framework. So I use Spring Boot, so I mention that, and I use any dependency like Spring Boot, Spring Security, or any logging mechanisms, or all this I will mention. And finally, in the OpenAPI documentation, I will follow OpenAPI 3.0 specification, and I will generate a Swagger UI for it. There will be a developer guide along with it, and then a Swagger UI, and then internal docs also we will mention. So unit test requirement, integration requirement, end-to-end tests, security tests, and load tests. All this will be clearly mentioned and outlined along with the responses. So any constraints, if they are like GDPR compliance or anything, so that also we need to mention. At the end of it, any risks like you see with the tokens, and all that you will mention, and finally you will mention the version of it, and then you will get the approval of your leads. Thank you.